2. We're live. All right. So thank you guys for coming by tonight, and thank you, Tony Ortega. Tony Ortega is literally an icon in my world and in many people's worlds. He is a journalist who's going to tell us tonight, hopefully, how you got into this and stuff, because you've had a long history with Scientology. And I think if anybody has more information, it's you.
Well, your story was one of my first and one of my favorites of all times,
Really, but I brought it to show everybody. Tony, I don't know how you found me, or did I find you?
Let's see. So I had moved to New Times, Los Angeles, and I had done the Graham Barry story.
Oh.
And so people there kind of knew my name.
Right.
And I don't remember who first told me, did you see that this woman defected live on ARS from Scientology? And I said, I'm very interested in that. It might have been Andreas. I can't remember for sure who first told me.
Probably Andreas.
But I started looking into it, and it was about a year later. And so I started looking at those old threads, and I was really impressed. And so at some point I reached out to you, and I remember we decided to have a meeting, and it was at a kind of a diner in Glendale.
No, it was at the Black Angus. I remember it. It was because they really had those high booths.
It was really nice. And I remember that I could tell, first of all, it was going to be a great story, because I had not really at that time. See, I had told Rick Ross's story. I had told Graham Barry's story, but I hadn't told the story of from a Scientologist perspective,
right.
Getting in, going through it, why you left. And I realized that this was just a perfect opportunity to do that and to really get a perspective on what the technology was like for somebody that went through it. But then the way you left was so unique and so amazing. And then the more I researched and realized how Andreas was part of it, I mean, it was like this incredible human story. But as I'm figuring this all out, I'm taking notes, and I'm realizing this is potentially the best story I've ever done. At the same time, I also could tell you were terrified, and you weren't sure if you really wanted to go public or not. So, we went through the data. I researched the documents, started putting together a story. And, you were wavering. You were wavering until the very last minute. I mean, I remember that, putting a story together like that takes a lot of work. And the publication I was at, I had editors to go through. I had copy editors and proofreaders to go through. And we're getting real close. We got all the art assembled. It's a big project putting something like that together for a newspaper. And it was a print newspaper at that time. And it was like a week before, and you just got cold feet. And you're like, Tony, I can't do it. I can't do it. And I was just like, Tory, it's too late. You can't do this to me at this point. You gotta, I know you're afraid. I understand. But your story's so powerful. It's going to help so many people. And then you said, okay, go for it. And I'm so glad.
We went back and forth, bless your heart, because at first it really had to do with my son, because I felt like they were going to come after him. And so I'd be like, no, I can't do this, because this is going to really blow up. And you'd say, okay, we won't. And then they would pick on me and do something, and it would piss me off. And I'd call you up and I'd say, Tony, publish it. We went back and forth a few times.
Yeah, a few times. I just remember that last minute one I was like, oh my God, what am I going to tell my editors? But no, it came out and it was great. And I have a friend in Belgium, a journalist, who emailed me and told me that it had brought tears to his eyes, the story of you and Andreas and all that you had been through. And for one journalist to tell another journalist that is the ultimate affirmation, So I was super thrilled about that. So that's still to this day my one of my top 3 or 4 favorite stories in the world. I'm so glad that we got to do that. And you still have the print copy. Beautiful.
Here it is, New Times, LA. and it's called Sympathy for the Devil, because I thought Andreas was the devil. It's such a great cover, and it's really a great. It's all about, he interviewed Andreas and he interviewed me, and it's really a great story, and it's on the internet. You can Google it.
Oh yeah, in a few different places. I reprinted it at my Substack when Andreas died.
Yeah,
because I wanted people to see what a great guy he was. So, yeah, 24 years ago, Tori. Can you believe that?
I know. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I mean, who would think? And I remember, because I knew Scientology would go and sit next to people and listen to what they were saying. So I wanted to eat at the Black Angus where we did the interview, because they have these big, tall booths.
Very
And I
smart.
knew they could not hear us with that.
Very smart.
They just
And
couldn't.
that story, it was for that story the only time I ever talked to Bob Minton on the phone.
The only time you what?
The only time I talked to Bob Minton on the phone was for that story.
Really?
Yeah. Sadly, I only talked to him briefly that one time.
Oh, darn. He was a great guy. I miss him all the time.
Yeah.
But I'm so happy you're around and crazy as ever. Tony has a thing called the Underground Bunker, and it is fantastic. It's just filled with facts and information and interviews and things. I mean, it's really, really good.
Well, let me give everyone the URL. It's TonyOrtega.substack.com. I moved over from my .org website to which is still going. The TonyOrtega.org is where the conversation is still going on, but TonyOrtega.substack.com is where the new stories show up. I've been there for a little over 3 years now. I love Substack. It's really great. But yeah, I started in the actual newspaper business way back when print newspapers were still pretty healthy. Not anymore, but yeah. Well, so you asked me how I started, right? You want to hear that?
Yeah. How did you get started?
About how I got into all this?
Yeah.
So I had been a college English instructor who wanted a different job, and I had moved to Phoenix and discovered this thing called the Phoenix New Times.
You were a college English? You were an English professor?
No, English instructor.
Instructor? Wow. At which college?
Oh, I had taught at Cal State Fullerton. I had taught at UC Santa Cruz, where I was working on doing graduate work. And then I had moved to Phoenix and saw this thing, the Phoenix New Times, which looks a lot like that newspaper you just held up. And I fell in love with it. It's the kind I had sort of been interested in journalism, but I really wasn't interested in the daily newspaper. I didn't like the kind of work they did in the daily newspaper, but the work that they were doing at the Phoenix New Times, I thought was incredible. Right. It was basically magazine journalism on a local scale. Right. And I applied for a job, and my timing was absolutely perfect. In the middle of 1995, these newspapers were making so much money and they had so much space, and they could bring on a new person. And so they gave me a shot, and I started doing some pieces, and they liked them. And then I'll never forget, my editor took me to lunch one day, and he said, look, they were giving me kind of this temporary position. He said, if you want a full-time permanent job, you got to put some meat on the table. I'll never forget he said that. A more substantial story, right? So I looked around, and one of the things that we were taught to do at an alternative weekly like that was look for stories that the daily paper had either missed or done badly. Right. And so I would regularly scan the Arizona Republic, look at their stories, and look at the letters to the editor. And one day in the summer of 1995, there was a letter from a guy named Rick Ross talking about a story they had done about a lawsuit he had lost. And he said, yes, it's true. I did lose that lawsuit, but you left out the crucial detail that it was the Church of Scientology that recruited the plaintiff against me. Right. And I was like, that sounds juicy. And again, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for things that the daily paper has either missed or done badly. So I contacted this guy. Right. Now, today, Rick Ross is a very well-known, nationally known cult deprogrammer guy. Back then, he wasn't so well-known. I got to do the first full-length profile of him. It was my first cover story for the Phoenix New Times. A lot of it was about Scientology. It was my first Scientology story. It appeared on November 30th, 1995. We're coming up on my 30th year anniversary. And yes, that story got me my permanent job at the Phoenix New Times. So
Wow.
big story for me. It meant a lot. And I learned a lot about Scientology just doing that one story, because Rick, one of the groups that he was always battling was Scientology. And so I got to write a lot about Scientology in that piece. Well, then, because I worked for that kind of a publication, I did a lot of different stories: business stories, law and crime stories, court stories, science stories. But I would come back once in a while to write about Scientology when I could find something about that. So I wrote a story about Jeff Jacobson, for example, who at that time in Phoenix was having his house picketed because he was the one that had discovered the Lisa McPherson death, and that the police were investigating it, right? So that was a great story for me. Then by the time I was in that period between 1995 and 1999, that company had also bought a paper in LA called New Times Los Angeles. That's the one you held up. And I got to know the editors there, and they really liked me, and they said, "We want you to come out here." And back then, it was very rare in that company for writers to move. But I got lucky, and they agreed to it. And so I got to move out to LA, where I'm from, and work for a couple of great guys, the editors at the New Times Los Angeles, Rick Bars and Jack Cheevers. And they allowed me to do some more reporting on Scientology. So then I did the Graham Barry story, and I did your story, and I did some other stories, and I was just really enjoying it. I was having a great time. Well, then they closed that paper in 2002 for economic reasons, and I had this 7,000 word story about Larry Wollersheim about to come out, and the paper died. So because in 2002 was the year when Scientology finally paid him, right? And so I wanted to explain that whole story and why they had always said not one thin dime for Wollersheim, and then they paid him $9,000 in dimes in 2002. So I wanted to tell that story, and so I had this huge story ready to go. Paper closes. They moved me around for a while. I went back to Phoenix. I went out to Kansas City. And then they made me editor-in-chief. My first editor-in-chief job was in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Oh.
Now, in those jobs, I stopped writing about Scientology because there was just nothing going on in those towns about Scientology at that time.
Sure.
Well, I was at New Times Broward Palm Beach in Fort Lauderdale for a year and a half, 2 years. And then my boss came to me. They had bought the Village Voice in New York City. And they had put somebody in that just didn't work out. And my boss came to me and he said, "You want to run New York?" And I said, "Yeah."
Yeah.
And he said, "How soon could you get there?" And I said, "Well, we're just about to put out the best of, Broward Palm Beach issue. It's a big thing we do every year. I could get up there in like 3 weeks." He says, "You have 3 days."
Wow. And you were married with kids.
So I flew up as fast as I could.
Were you married?
No, I was married, but I didn't have children yet. Yeah, I was married. And so I went up there March 2007. I became the editor-in-chief of the Village Voice.
Right.
Well, what was going on with the Voice at that time was, it's a legendary, at that time, it was a legendary print weekly newspaper, and it had a good website.
Sure.
But what I needed to do was to kind of change the thinking that we are a daily digital enterprise that happens to put out a famous print newspaper. In other words, kind of switch the mentality up a little bit. We got to focus on the web. We've got to get more web reporting. We've got to be more daily.
You were ahead of your time on that.
Well, not really. I mean, we had lots of competition there. It was really tough. But we started to do it. We started to really beef up the website and put more daily reporting as well as the weekly reporting in the paper. And I, as an editor, I like to set an example. So I wanted to also contribute to the web at the same time that I was editing stories and, helping to shape the story, the newspaper. So my first project was I loved the archive room because this is the Village Voice. It's been there since 1955, right? And
Right.
I just spent hours in the archive room going through these old newspaper archives. And at
Oh,
that point in 2007, there was almost none of that material online.
right.
Okay. So what
Right.
I started to do was I was starting in, we didn't have the 1955 volume for some reason, but I had the 1956. Starting in 1956, each day I would choose another issue and just choose one story from that weekly issue from 1956, 57, 58, and put it online so people could see. And so I found, for example, the article that had the first mention of a young musician named Bobby Dylan. The first article that mentioned a young comedian in the village named Walter, aka Woody Allen. I mean, I was
Oh,
just finding these incredible stories
right.
documenting life in Greenwich Village and New York, and just amazing stuff. I thought I was having such a good time. But you know what, Tori? No one was reading it.
That's what I was going to ask you. So, in other words, someone wrote it and then they just archived it, right?
Well, I mean, when you publish the newspaper, you keep old copies around and you bind them and put them in a library, right? So those old issues are still sitting there, 50 years later, but
Right.
none of those stories was online. So I was taking one story from each issue just to put online every day to show people what, a Village Voice history. And I loved
Nice.
it. I called it Clip Job, and I found some incredible stories, but
Yeah.
nobody was reading it. Nobody was reading it. So at some point, an old friend of mine named Tori Chrisman called me up, and she said, "Hey, have you heard about?" And I don't even remember what the first one was, but you called me up and said, "Have you seen this Scientology story going on?" And I jumped on it, and I don't even remember what it was. It was just some Scientology story, and I put it on the Village Voice website, and it went nuts. I
Wow.
mean, nuts, hundreds of comments. I was like, whoa.
What year
And so I'm
was
like,
it?
okay, Tori, give me more. Tori, give me more. And so I started, once in a while in 2009, 2010, every once in a while, I'd put a story about Scientology on there from my old sources, people like you, Mark Bunker, other people. And they were doing amazing.
Right.
Well, then came the fateful April 2011. That is when I heard about the Squirrel Busters outside of Marty's house, right?
Oh, Marty.
Right. And
Now,
so I
ex- explain Marty Rathbun
okay,
to me.
so Marty Rathbun had been basically the number two person in Scientology and was David Miscavige's main enforcer. Very
Right.
scary guy who had left Scientology in 2004, and he went so underground, people were hearing rumors that he died. But what he had actually done is he'd gone down to Corpus Christi, a little village near Corpus Christi, and was just basically completely off the radar.
Wow.
And then in 2008, I think it was, Jason Begay, actor who was a former Scientologist, made this nationwide tour. I actually went on him for part of it. He met me in New York. We took the train down to DC. He was going around the country. He wanted to meet all these people because he
Right.
wanted to get people together to, get involved. And it ended up really is what helped the Tampa Bay Times do the Truth Rundown in 2009 was Jason Begay going around and recruiting people. He saw Mike Rinder, who at that time was in Denver. He saw various people.
But he was
Well,
still in, right?
no. He had
Okay.
he had come out and made that famous video with Mark Bunker already. It
Okay.
was
Which I
right,
was there for that. The
right,
Show Me the Mother.
and so then he went around the country meeting people,
Okay.
and he'd heard that Marty was in Corpus Christi. He went there,
Ooh,
and there's some famous photos of Marty and Jason, and
right.
Jason, and I think Amy Scobie, Matt Pash, somebody else went to Marty at that time and said, "Look, you have to understand, people are being harmed. We need to speak out." And Marty credits them. He finally decided to come forward. And so Marty Rathbun then started his blog the day after the Truth Rundown came out, right? So thanks to Jason Begay and some other things, Mike Rinder, Marty Rathbun, Jefferson Hawkins, Tom DeVaught, all talked to the Tampa Bay Times for that incredible series in 2009. And the next day, Marty starts his blog. So Marty is blogging about Scientology, and this is a 5-alarm fire for David Miscavige and Scientology. They send down these clowns they call the Squirrel Busters to basically harass Marty Rathbun and make his life a living hell. That's what they told this videographer that was working for them. And I realize, and I'm in New York at the Village Voice, and I'm realizing this is a huge story, right? This one guy is such a threat to the Church of Scientology. They have this goon squad outside his house 24 hours a day doing everything they can to disrupt this man's life. And so I just started writing about it at the Voice, and it was getting tons of just amazing traffic, comments. And that at that point, I was like, you know what? That archive thing is fun. I'm glad I did that and found the article about Bobby Dylan. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm sticking to Scientology. And that was when, April 2011, writing about Marty Rathbun every day, that's what inspired me. I'm going to write about Scientology every single day. And I have been every day since April 2011.
Wow. That's amazing, Tony. It really is.
Crazy.
It really is. I mean, it's the knowledge that you've gained is just incredible. And that you've shared, with everybody.
Well, I've gotten to know such wonderful people like you, and so many other people that have helped me understand. I mean, that was one of the things I loved about your story, was it really helped me understand the journey that a Scientologist goes on. And then that was one of the things Jason Begay, when we got together, when he visited me in New York on his nationwide tour, he said to me, listen, reporters focus too much on Xenu. You've got to focus more on the human stories of what people are going through in Scientology. And I really appreciated that. I thought he was 100% right. And I've tried to do that. Of course, I still have fun with Xenu. I think J&D is very important when you're covering the Church of Scientology regularly. But yeah, it's the human stories that are the most important.
Right. And my thing with who's the guy we were just talking about?
Begay?
No, the other guy. I just forgot his name.
Marty Rathbun?
Yeah. Do you know my story? What happened with him?
No.
Okay, so do you mind if I tell it?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so I just want these guys to understand. He was like the top dog with Miscavige, a bully, and he started this blog. He left Scientology and started this blog. And people, I think I would call them independents, because they weren't against Hubbard, they weren't against the tech, but they were against the church and Miscavige.
Right.
And so they were all like, hail Marty, Marty's the greatest, he's everything. Now, I had spent time with, Stacy Brooks, Jesse Prince, who left in the middle of the night all alone, stuff like that. So I would go on his blog and make that post and just say, just so you know, there were people before you, Marty. And I would just make that post, that you're not like the kingfish of the universe. There are some people that suffered greatly before you, right? And nobody would talk to me, nobody. And I would do it every day. I would just go on there and make one little post. There are other people that were there. I would list out their names. That was it. Nobody talked to me, nothing. And all of a sudden I get an email from Marty, open up a Hushmail account. And I think, oh my God, it's like going to the principal, right? I thought he's going to bawl me out and say, get the hell off my site. You're not an independent. Go away, right? Because I wasn't saying anything against Hubbard or the tech or anything. I was just saying there were people before him. That was it.
Yeah.
So I opened it up and it says, for your eyes only. And it's a 25-step program with the goal to muzzle Tory. That's what it was. And it's step by step, the awful things they will do to shut someone up. get my husband to go to the Better Business Bureau and call all the TV and radio and tell them I'm a liar and just all this stuff. They went to my work and planted some stuff and got a guy to join there and just on and on and on. But that was my Marty thing where, as much as he ended up, for anybody who doesn't know, I think he got paid off. I do.
Yeah, no question.
Because he had no money and he went from zero. He was going to sue them. His wife was suing them. And they were inches from Miscavige having to go to court. And all of a sudden, everything was canceled. They didn't pay the attorneys.
So let me tell you about where that document came from. I don't know if he ever told you how he had it.
He never did.
Yeah. See, when Mike Rinder escaped in London in 2007, he had a thumb drive. He had a thumb drive with a ton of documents, OSA documents, OSA plans, including your program, the Chuck Beatty program, the Rich Libby program, the
No one ever told me that.
The Mark Ebner program, the Mark Headley program. Wow. All of those were in Mike's thumb drive.
Wow.
Well, I think Mike was concerned about liability, but they wanted you guys to have your own files so you could see what was planned against you. So Marty was the one that sent Mark Ebner his program. Marty was the one who sent Rich Libby his program. Marty was the one who sent Mark Headley his program because Mike was a little concerned about his liability on that. But that's where that actually came from. And wow. Yeah, I mean, it's just Marty. I loved working with Marty Rathbun. He was so much fun because he would give me shit and I'd give it right back to him. Right. But he knew that I cared about the truth and I wanted the full story. See, this is one of the things that motivated me originally, Tori, and why I wanted to get into this field was in the internet in 1995 when I started, there was just so many rumors and assumptions and bad conclusions. And I just felt like, let's get some real data and try to build some knowledge here. And so that's what I've tried to do is try to, get things that are very well reported. And Marty appreciated that. He would rather have had a story that had the facts, right? And so he loved working with me, even though he loved, we just loved boxing each other. And he got really angry at me a couple of times. I mean, he and Monique both got really angry at the way I wrote some things. But I just thought he was terrific. I thought he was really great to work with. And of course, he was saying things. If you want to look it up, the readers, if you're interested, I did this full write-up where I traced his arc on his blog from 2009 when he started to 2016 when he turned, basically. And you're right. At first, in 2009 and 2010, he was Kingfish, and he had all of these independents going, Marty. And then what happened? About 2010, 2011, he started getting really pissed off because they weren't listening to him. Are you kidding me? Try to convince independent Scientologists all to do something? There's no way, right? And so they had other ideas, and it just started driving him crazy that people were not, considering his word the last word. And I think you'll find, if you're interested in Marty Rathbun's journey, look that story up at TonyOrtega.org. I think I call it Marty Rathbun's journey from rebel to something. I don't know. And because I went through every blog post he'd ever written to put together that kind of arc that he was on. And then, they were in a winning position. They just won at the appellate level. Monique Rathbun was about to start causing Scientology all kinds of pain. And suddenly they put up the white flag and quit and made sure their attorneys weren't paid a penny. It was a terrible betrayal. And then Marty started making those videos for Scientology, trashing Mike Rinder, who had been his best friend. Yeah, me, but he trashed Mike, his best friend. It was so disgusting.
Yeah, that was so too bad because remember when they were fishing in the beginning? They would go, these two guys would be out fishing and talking about, just all kinds of shit. But it was just so fun to see them together.
Yep.
And then to see it, how it ended up, it was so icky.
Terrible, terrible.
Yeah. But I'm glad that you told me that. I never knew that. And Mike never
Yeah,
told me. And
that's how
all
you
the
got
time
that.
that I've seen him, he never said that he had anything to do
He
with
was
that.
being careful. He was concerned. I think he was concerned about legal liability on that. Of course, now you know.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I think he had a few things he was concerned about on the legal end of things. But fair enough, I look at it as, he did what he had to do.
He
He
was a
said
brave
his,
guy. He was a very brave guy. He knew
yeah,
they were always harassing him. They were always trying to destroy him.
right.
And I think he's amazing. And I'm so sorry we lost him.
I know, me too. It was way too young. I mean, he was what, in his 50s?
He was 69.
Oh, was he that old? I didn't know he was that old. I thought he was much younger than that. I mean, I'm 78, so I'm like ancient. I'm the oldest person of everybody.
You look fabulous, Tori, like always.
Thank you. Well, I work. I just keep going. That's it. That's my thing. It's just like just keep going because I can't tell you how many times I've almost quit, and then I go. Scientology does some shit either to me or to one of my friends or
Yeah,
to
yeah,
you or
yeah,
whatever. And
yeah.
I just think that's it. I mean,
Right.
I just interviewed Ish. Remember who Ish is with the Nation of Islam?
Oh, right, right.
Yeah. So I interviewed him, and it was fascinating to hear the history of the Nation of Islam and how much they were connected to Scientology. I had no idea.
Yeah.
I had no idea. But I just have so many funny stories of stuff like that with them, where I went out to meet the Nation of Islam and Scientology kicked them out. They have a big community center out in Inglewood,
Right.
and they were all out there in a line. And I went up and I said, "What's going on?" And they said, "They kicked us out." And I knew what happened. See, the lady who was running it was a psychologist. And
Ah,
and she was going to go down to Skid Row and try to help the people on Skid Row. And I'm sure she said, "Look, I'm a psychologist. I am not using Dianetics." And so they kicked them all out. And so this guy comes out to me and he goes, "Who are you? What's your name?" I said, "Who the hell cares what my name is? You kicked all these people out. You have community center and you kick the people out. Shame on you." It's pathetic. But anyway,
and well,
we
let's tell your viewers another great Tory Christmas story. I just remembered because I finally got a chance to tell this story. I had to wait 20 years before you let me tell this story.
What is it?
Yeah, and I waited. I waited. It was worth it.
Thank you.
When I did your story in 2001, it got a lot of attention because like I said, I got to tell that full story of what it was like. One of my favorite details, for example, was you grew up in was Chicago, right? And
Right.
you
Suburb.
you describe yourself as kind of a free spirit, free speech hippie,
Yeah.
and you made your way to California, and you said, this Scientology seemed to be part of that whole counterculture freedom thing. But then you started wondering, how come you got pictures of Hubbard that are like pictures of Mao everywhere? So I love telling people that. It was just a wonderful story about, and your epilepsy and all that. And then of course the stuff with Andreas was just, what a sweet story, the two of you. And so the story comes out, and for 20 years I could not tell the story. You wouldn't let me. Finally let me tell the story that one of the people who read your story and was so impressed, and it helped keep her out of Scientology, was Rosie O'Donnell.
Oh yeah. Right. I only said that because I promised her. See, she was going to do a TV show. Can I tell these guys the story? Okay, so
Sure.
I'm watching TV and I see Tom Cruise with Rosie O'Donnell, and they're buttering her up to her. And I call my friend Spanky, who has lines to celebrities, and I say, "Look, they're getting her." And she says, okay, I'll send her Sympathy for the Devil, the magazine. So she sent it to her. She FedExed it to her. And that night, I get a little email, dear Magoo, which was my nickname online. This is Roro. And I write her back and I say, how the hell do I know you're Roro? You could be the Office of Special Affairs pretending to be Roro. Right? I was like really terrified. And, you know, because they were like always bugging my phone and stuff like that. I never knew what they knew and didn't know. And so I said, look, call me. That's my thing always. Somebody wants to talk to me, you call me. If you can't call me, out of my world. And so, because I know also, Yachty told me they will never, ever call anybody on the phone, ever. They don't want to be traced, you know, anything like that. So she called me and we talked for about 2 hours and I explained everything to her. And the next day she called me, the next night, and she said, I cannot thank you enough because I was going to give them, they said, we're having a big, this big party in this hall. And so and I'm invited. So she went and it ended up being some Sea Org guys in a corner and her. And they just pounded her for hours. And she said, Tori, if I had not talked to you, I would have given him $1 million. And this was years ago. It was in the beginning of 2000. And she said, but I didn't give it to him. And I'm so pissed off. I'm going to make a TV show about it because that was when her TV show was really jumping. And I said, Rosie, think about it. What do your friends and your family say about that idea? And she said, they don't want me to do it. And I said, I agree with them because here's the deal. If you make a TV show about it, they're going to come after you like you can't even think about. And your family and your kids and everything else. And I said, this way you can just stay in the background. And every time you talk to a celebrity, you let them know to go to xenu.net or some other, but let them know this is a bad group. Don't get into it. So I feel like that was much better.
Well, and you told me then, and I was dying to tell that story, but you made me wait 20 years, and that's okay.
Well, thank you, because I told her I wasn't going to say anything, for a long, long time.
But
because I was worried too. I figured if they, they were always if they could find something on me, they would go after me. Yeah, and I thought. We both have lived through a bunch of fair game. Both. I mean, you have a ton. I have too. Tons.
Yeah.
They broke in my house. They've flattened my tires. They've stripped my computer. They on and on and on. It's just unbelievable. And the funniest part is that I really didn't think they did fair game. I really didn't. Really? I stood up in court against Margaret Singer and said, that is a lie. They do not do fair game. They canceled that. And Jesse Prince showed me, he goes, Tori, yes, they canceled the title of fair game. But at the bottom, and he showed me, it said, this does not apply to suppressive people, who are the only people they do fair game on. Right?
Well, what the later policy says that the name fair game brings bad public relations. So you can no longer use the name fair game, but then right under that it says, but the policy is not changed, right? So, and it's very clear. It says it black and white. It's basically saying we're going to keep doing to people what we've always done, but just don't use that name because that's bad publicity. And so this week, Scientology submitted new briefs in the appeal of Leah Remini's lawsuit. There's a preliminary ruling that's on appeal. And this week, Scientology submitted briefs saying there is no such thing as fair game. It was canceled in 1968. These lawsuits are lying. And you're just like, come on, people, we can read. It says the name causes bad public relations, but the policy stays in place. It says it right there in black and white. But, Scientology just lie to the courts. It's incredible.
And there's only 1 million of us out here that can tell our stories of fair game. It's
Exactly.
like, come on. But they're knuckleheads. That's the way they are. So we're lucky in that sense.
But I also appreciated you threw some wonderful parties at your place for people that were doing this kind of work. And I got to meet some very important people through those parties. I got to meet some really interesting people that helped me get some wonderful stories. So I don't know if I ever thank you for that. That was wonderful.
That's why I had them because, well, I had them because I lost all my friends. But then once we got it going, we started with 4 people, and then 5, and then 10, and then 15, and finally people were flying in to meet each other, and I realized it truly showed you how the right hand does not know what the left hand's doing in Scientology. I mean, people would walk in, they'd go, "Here's my potluck." Because it was a potluck, so everybody had to bring some food. So here's my food, and then they jump over. Here's Tony Ortega. Okay, Tony, I was in this room. You were in that room. What happened in your room? That kind of thing. It was just like constant for 14 years. And I got my neighbors at the time. I said, Derek, who now has moved out of LA, but I said, look, these guys, here's what happened. Bop, bop, bop. If you see anything, come let me know. So they would come every time. They'd knock on the door and open it, and they'd go, they're out here taking license plates. So we'd all run down the street, get the hell out of here. And they'd all go run and jump in their cars and drive off. Yeah. That was a fun time, though. It really was, because it was really like, so many people that had not gotten together got together and got to hear different stories.
Yeah. When you mentioned that they never call, you're absolutely right, and that's why I have a story about the one time they did call, because it was so unusual. I was in LA. I don't remember why, but I visited my mom, and my mom lives on the east side of LA, and my mom and my stepdad were just very entertained. There was this local school board where they were having these religious fights, right? That the people on the school board wanted to have prayer in the school, and it was causing all kinds of a controversy. And they were just interested in it. They thought it was interesting. So while I was there, they said, listen, there's a board meeting tonight. It could be kind of wild. They're all going to be arguing over this issue. You want to go and just watch? I said, sure, sounds like fun. Yeah. And so my mom and my stepdad and I went to this school board, and we couldn't get in. It was so popular. There's so many people that wanted to see this big fight over Christian prayer in school. We couldn't even get in. And so we said, okay, never mind. We went back. So then I went back to LA. I was staying in a hotel before flying home the next day from LAX. And I'm sitting in my room, and the room phone rings. Well, you know how unusual that is now, right? We all have smartphones. You never even use the phone in your hotel room. So the phone in my hotel room rings. And I pick it up, and I said, yeah, I figure it's the front desk. And it's some guy from Freedom Magazine.
Come on. Seriously?
Yes. And he's like, he wants to know why my mother and I had gone to the board meeting of the school district. Wow. And I was just like, oh, you guys are hilarious, And I didn't tell him anything, but and I realized they must have been so confused that Ortega and his mother were at a board meeting about Christian prayer in schools. What's he up to? What is this guy up to? Something's up. And Miscavige is screaming at them, find out. What is he doing? This makes no sense. And so they did what they never do. They called me, and not only did they call me on my hotel room phone, which, which of course the hotel, of course, is not supposed to give them that number, whatever. Anyway, I just thought it was hilarious.
That is hilarious. They had to really be thinking, whoa, wait a minute. What is this guy up to?
And of course, what did it tell me? It tells me that when my mom and my stepdad and I went to that school board meeting, again, just for entertainment value, we were being tracked. We were being followed.
Right. Unbelievable, Tony. Unbelievable. That's funny, though.
Tory, And I think about the fair game stuff. I've experienced my share of it, and they've done some scary stuff. But it doesn't stop. They don't understand it. All it does is inspire us to keep going, right?
Exactly. Every time I'm almost ready to go, okay, I'm done. And then they do something or say something. And I just think, you know what? No. I mean, that's what happened with the Nation of Islam. I was watching TV and Louis Farrakhan came on and he said, everyone is going to be on course Tuesday night, or we're going to thank you and say goodbye. And I went, that's disconnection. And I'd heard he was in Scientology. So I fired up my webcam and made a thing to the African American community. And Ish just acknowledged it because a lady had told me it went completely viral. And I said, why? And she said, because you were the only person that told us what was really going on. Right. So they didn't know it was Scientology. Yeah. And I made the video and I said, this is Scientology. I was in it for 30 years. They had 5 Black people in Scientology in 30 years. Yeah. So they don't care about you. They want your money. They want bodies in the shop and they want connections. That's it. And
I got to write a story several years ago. One of the really surprising things was they wanted to get a lot of Nation of Islam people on course that didn't have the money for it. And so they hit up a celebrity for a donation, basically to pay for the first year or so of all the Nation of Islam processing.
Wow.
Do you know who that celebrity was?
No.
Leah Remini.
Come on.
Yep. She gave me the documents to show that Leah Remini, made the donation that paid for the Nation of Islam people to get started in Scientology.
So she was still in, obviously.
Oh yeah, no, she was. No, this is back when she was still in.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Farrakhan made the call for everybody in Nation of Islam to get Dianetics. They all wanted to do Book 1 processing in October 2010.
Right.
That's when Farrakhan made the call. Leah didn't leave until 2013.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was the thing. I ran into them because we were protesting. And these big Black guys showed up and I said, you're Scientologists now, right? And they said, no, we're Dianeticists. And Ish explained that. And he said, yeah, in the beginning, they were just using Dianetics, which I thought, okay, that makes sense because then it doesn't run into Jesus and Christianity and all the other stuff that they have going. But now Louis Farrakhan is clear and I think OT. So I don't get it.
Well, Tony Muhammad in particular, Tony Muhammad and a few others did go up the bridge, and Tony Muhammad actually won a Freedom Medal. But I think that sort of partnership between Scientology and Nation of Islam petered out several years ago. I don't think it's the same thing today.
Well, he said it is. What he said is they use the Inglewood. Inglewood, that community center. They meet every week there. That's their meeting place. Okay. And now everyone in the Nation of Islam has to be a Scientologist. That's what it said. Listen to the video. You know, when you have time.
You don't see it too much, but okay, I believe it.
It's pretty amazing to hear the history of it. I mean, it was like they were back with them with Hubbard in the 70s. They were with who's the guy? Jonestown. They were with that guy, Jim Jones. I mean, it's kind of weird to hear the history of it. It really is. But anyway, whatever. Our lives. I've got to ask you some questions because there's a bunch of questions that I'm not asking you and I'm going to get in trouble for it. Okay, so are you ready for some questions?
All right.
Yeah. Okay, this is from Gina. Tony, do you think, now I don't know if do you know Audit LA? Do you know who she is?
I just really have not been paying much attention to the LA protests. I'm sorry.
Okay. So we'll skip that. I'm sorry, Gina, but it's not really his, I don't think he's you're not doing that, right? Tony?
No, I said I have not been paying a lot of attention to the LA protests. It's just
Right.
not something I'm
Okay.
paying
And
attention
now
to.
this is the next person, and they said, Tony has the most comprehensive understanding of Scientology than any Scientologist I've ever seen.
Well, that's very nice to hear. I appreciate that a lot, but I never forget. People like Tori Crispin know more about Scientology. I've forgotten more about Scientology than I'll ever know. So I mean, that's the thing is I was not a Scientologist, and I learned because I talked to people that were, and
Right.
those relationships are everything for me.
And that's the thing. You're
Thank
very
you.
smart at interviewing people, and you learn from them. That's how Bunker is. Like Bunker and he used to always come to my talks, and he would say blah 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 blah, and afterwards I would take him aside and I'd say, look, that is not true. You know what you just said. And he'd say, well, what is true? And I'd tell him.
Right.
And
Right.
he got to be better and better and better. And I try to teach critics that. I say, Bunker was, he was just a guy with the camera in the beginning. And now he's a really good, interviewer.
Yeah. No, and you look, I'm always learning. I mean, not too many years ago, I remember I called OT8 a course, and I had a Scientologist all over me. It's an auditing level, Tony. It's not a course, and so now I always make sure I say auditing level. I mean, yeah, those are important kinds of things. But on the other hand, once in a while, I would say your Thetan. So like. So Tori needs to make sure that her Thetan, blah, blah, blah. And then you get all these Scientologists jumping on you. You are a Thetan. It's not your Thetan. And then I whip out, I can show them where L. Ron Hubbard himself referred to somebody's Thetan. He has. So, but I do my best to try to learn from those mistakes.
You do. And there are courses. I mean, that's not wrong.
No, I know, but that's an important distinction to make, and I need to know those things, and so that's why, again, I do my best to understand it, but I always defer to the people that really know it, the people that were in it, and I'm so fortunate that I have some wonderful people I can call on all the time to help me navigate some of that, because it's so arcane, it's so difficult.
No, it's so weird, but it is. I always say it's like a triangle, and the one side is training, and the other side is auditing. So training is courses. Auditing is in session. That's the difference. All right. So Kelly said, Tony, here we go. What did I do? Tony, a year ago, you and Begay and Headley and a few others went to Germany and did a seminar with Occult Awareness Network.
I did not go to that trip to Germany. I know that Jason Begay and Mark Headley went, and I can't remember exactly what year that would have been. I guess it had to have been around the time of Anonymous, so it would have been 2008 or 2009. So, Mark Bunker may have that video somewhere. But no,
and the other thing is you can ask Mark Headley.
Yeah.
Kelly.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's another one from Kelly. Marty started to crack when Louis Theroux, My Scientology Story. Yeah.
I mean, the pressure was on him then. I don't want to give, I love Louis Theroux. I love his movie, but I don't want to give him too much credit about Marty, because but yeah, you're definitely right. But see, the thing is, when Marty is kind of getting frustrated with Louis Theroux, that's how he used to get frustrated with me too. That's just Marty. Right. He would get so frustrated with those of us journalists trying to understand Scientology. So I don't know. I've heard people point that out to me. They think that maybe that movie was really crucial in turning Marty Rathbun. I don't think so.
No, I agree with you on this, and I'll tell you why. It wasn't the movie, but what Scientology is good at is finding your button. And in that movie, Marty shows his button, which is his kid.
Right. The guys that the Squirrel Busters or whatever who showed up mentioned his kid, and that set him off. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And Marty said, I would never bring a child into any of this. Yeah. And they went, boom, we got it. And I think they went after him after that. So I don't think it was the movie, but it was that button.
Yeah.
That came out. Okay, so now this is another person saying, thank you, Tony and Tori, for all the excellent work you've done to expose the evil criminal human trafficking cult called Scientology. We've been following you both for many years. All right.
And we appreciate it, right, Tori?
Yeah, you guys are just as important to us as we are to you. That's the way I feel. I always say every voice matters, and it's really true. I mean, you can sit at home and think, who am I? Who cares? But the people who actually come on and say something, it's really important. Don't you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so here's another one. I hope we see the end of the cult of Scientology in our lifetime. I'm amazed that it's still going. A cult full of bullies in the days of the internet. How is it still a thing? Because our country, Stacey Brooks explained this to me early on. We went to a cult conference, and there were all these different cults there. And everybody, to me, sounded like the Sea Org. I was like, you were in the Sea Org, right? And they were like, no, Church of Christ, different things. But the last day, they had those two little girls that were locked up in barrels for 2 weeks. And I'm telling you, you could hear a pencil drop. You could hear a pin drop. It was like the entire room was just shocked hearing their awful things that they had to live through. And I said to Stacey after, how could this possibly happen in the United States of America, in Ohio? And she said, Tori, this country was founded on freedom of religion and freedom of speech. So those freedoms are very, very protected. And that's what I think a lot of people don't get, that they think, sue them. It's like, it's a different thing.
Well, Scientology, and also I think it's not only do we have those freedoms, but we have government institutions and courts that are set up to protect those freedoms,
right?
That are not prepared, literally not prepared to deal with bad actors like the Church of Scientology. So that's what we see in court time and time. Just this week, those briefs that in Leah Remini's lawsuit we saw posted, these attorneys are just lying to these judges. And I've seen it time and time again that these courts are just not, they're just not set up to deal with something that calls itself a church that is so underhanded, so untruthful, and it kind of doesn't work in our system. In our system, you expect that, okay, so Monsanto killed some people with its pesticide. At some point, they're going to say, let's settle because we don't want to go to court. Scientology is just like, no, more appeals, more money, throw whatever. We're gonna burn everything to the ground.
Right.
And the courts are not set up for that. So what Scientology does, it ends up weaponizing our most cherished beliefs. They take things like the freedom of religion and freedom of speech and turn them into weapons to harm people. And our system of government, our courts are not equipped to deal with that. And that's why they get away with things. Now, on the other hand, people like Tori Crispin are having an effect. People like Leah Remini are having an effect. And there's fewer and fewer people that want to join this thing. And we see it year after year. They are struggling to staff their facilities. They are struggling to get new people in. Alex Barnes-Ross this weekend at the IAS said he'd never seen a weaker crowd at an IAS gathering at St. Hill Manor. I think that they're really struggling to keep up appearances. But the way they have it set up, the way that these nested alphabet entities like RTC and CST and all that, the way they're set up, David Miscavige doesn't need Scientologists. He has the copyrights, he has the trademarks, he has the attorneys, and he has the money. And he can keep putting on this dog and pony show forever until the government steps in. So the question then is, when is the government going to do something? And I have to tell you, Tori, in my 30 years of reporting on the Church of Scientology, I have never seen a more dismal environment for government action on the Church of Scientology than right now.
Yeah.
It's so depressing after all the things that you have done and Leah has done and Mike did and the Headleys have done and so many other people to expose this organization, all the journalists, and there have been people in government interested in doing something. Right now, nothing. There's no way. And it's a shame. So on the one hand, it's not a good time for Scientology. They are struggling. They're struggling to bring people in. They're struggling to staff the facilities. But David Miscavige is still getting these billionaires to fork over so many millions of dollars.
And how is that happening?
And that's the thing that's amazing to me is that there's just no question that Scientology is having a hard time recruiting, and Scientology is way down on the size. But I have never seen him get more people give $1 million donations. How is he doing that? You have to give Miscavige one thing. He is very good at pulling $1 million donations out of these morons. Who apparently have too much money and not enough sense.
Yeah, and obviously don't read or listen or think. I mean, people go, well, it's a tax exemption. I mean, okay, put your money in a good charity where it really is helping.
Or you were in. You remember how much pressure there was not to look at Theta or not to, go
but
against.
These are people that were never in. No, these are people that were never in. These aren't millionaires that are in Scientology. These are people that are just donating to them.
Oh, they're all Scientologists. They're all OTs.
You think so?
Oh yeah. Trish Duggan,
any of them. The people that
Tom Cummins, Jim Bridgeforth, the Faboses, the Atkinson Bakers, they're all OT Scientologists.
All right. I stand corrected. I thought they were, because when I remember going to the free wins when they were starting the free wins, and we had to not all, but a bunch of us had to go there, and people were giving thousands of dollars. And I looked at Gail Moran, who was married to Chick Corea, and I said, who the hell are these people? I'd never seen them. And she said, you know what, Tori, we know almost every Scientologist. We see everybody, and we have never seen these people before. And that's what I think. I think somehow they're digging up these people from other things that I don't. You've tracked it down in the ROTs?
Well, no, I've been tracking them for years. I've seen these people give a $500,000, then I see them give $1 million, then I see them give $2.5 million, and then I see them give $10 million. It's the same person, and they're all OTs. They're all in the database.
Yeah,
no question.
That's true. I read a few where it was like 500 million, and I thought, who the hell is that? I never heard of the name at all. Okay, somebody just jumped on here. Hi, Tony. I met you in Judge Hammock's courtroom for a hearing in Leah's lawsuit in February 2023. And there was a camera in the courtroom. Any chance we'll get to see the footage captured in the courtroom?
I believe it was January 2024. And I'm sure it was January 2024. And that camera was from ABC 7. So what happens is they own that footage, and they don't even have that reporter anymore. They would never release that. You'd have to convince Channel 7 to give up something they own, and they won't.
Yeah, they're not going to release that.
I don't think we'll ever see that.
I don't think so either. All right, now here's another one. I guess that means question. Tony, do you feel like
Scientology blackmailing Marty? So that's the big question, and I know most theories settled on two different ideas. One, they had dug up something on Marty that was so awful they were blackmailing him, and that's why he made his wife quit her lawsuit. I don't believe so. I don't believe it, because his attorneys could have used that to destroy Scientology. Believe me, that didn't happen. The other one is the kid, right? That they had adopted this child. That was part of how this all happened. Was Marty and Monique had been going through a lot of harassment in Ingleside by the Bay. They then moved up to closer to where Ray Jeffrey lived, Bulverde, Texas, and they got a house that was set way back from the road with lots of wooded area. So even if Scientology was out in front on their street, they couldn't see them. It was a perfect location. And that's when they were going through the process of adopting a baby boy. Well, Marty was walking around on his property and spotted a deer camera on a car, on a tree that was aimed at their driveway. And they realized Scientology had been taking pictures of license plates of everybody that came and went, including the birth mother of the adopted baby.
Oh.
That's when Monique said, enough is enough. We need to sue these people. That's why they finally decided to sue. But that was 2013. They didn't cancel the suit until almost 2017, 4 years later. I can tell you that adoption was final and done way before that. There was no issue with the adoption. I know there were people like, they threatened somehow to take that baby boy away from Marty, and that's why he had to throw in the towel. No, the adoption was final. It wasn't blackmail. It wasn't the baby. I'm going to shock your mind. Get this. It was Marty's effing ego. Okay. The reason why Monique Rathbun's lawsuit was doing so well was that her attorneys were specifically not listening to Marty's advice.
Right.
And that drove him insane. Because remember who Marty Rathbun was. He was number 2 in Scientology. Virtually everybody in the world of Scientology had to do what he wanted. Right? He was an enforcer. He comes out and he can't even get his wife's attorneys to listen to him. It drove him nuts. And I think that's why. So then when Dave came with an offer, a real offer, he took it because he was so pissed that these attorneys were not listening to him. It was ego. And they found his number, and that's why they canceled the lawsuit. I really don't think it has to do with anything to do with the blackmail or the baby.
Well, we'll never know.
No, we never will.
Because he's not going to speak out about it. So, but I'm glad to hear your side of it. Because I've certainly heard the other ones.
I mean, I was there. I mean, that's the thing is everyone's got an opinion, but I was literally there. I was in Marty's house with his attorneys talking about the lawsuit. I could see what was going on. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So here's another one. Tony Ortega, #1 journalist exposing Scientology on the planet. There you go.
Thank you, but it's really Target 2 that I want to be the #1 journalist of, and
okay. So here's a question, Tony. What kind of fair game tactics have you experienced? And please, I will say this: don't feel like you have to answer that.
No, it's okay because I'll just tell you what I told Leah on her show and what I told Alex Gibney on Going Clear, and they sent Dave LeBeau, the private investigator, twice to see my mother, which scared her. They hired an out-of-work New York Daily News reporter to pretend he was writing a story that my wife's employer had hired a terrorist. And the reason why they called her a terrorist was she had gone on back when Anonymous was going, there were these various forums like WWP, right? Why We Protest, and there was interbulation.org and all that. Thousands of people went on those boards and made fun of Scientology. And the woman I ended up marrying was one of those thousands of people who went on those forums and cracked some jokes about Scientology on an anonymous board. And Anonymous, Scientology, is a terrorist organization. So they hired this out-of-work reporter to pretend he was working on a story that her employers had hired a terrorist.
Wow.
And basically, it's right out of L. Ron Hubbard's playbook. They never call me. They never call me up and say, hey, why didn't you include our quote in that story? Here's a quote. We disagree with what you say. No, they go after your loved ones.
Right.
Right. So they have a private investigator visit my mother. They try to get my wife fired from her job. It comes and goes. Like all of a sudden, she'll have a new operation being run on her. Or I'll be hearing from people like yeah, not too long ago, I heard from a guy. A friend of mine. He was a journalist. I was a journalist, but we were at different places in Kansas City in 2004. And he called me up and said, "Hey, I've been getting some questions from this guy. I think he's at Freedom Magazine." So it kind of comes and goes. And right now, not too bad. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to scare you. They're just trying to scare you that they're gonna ruin your livelihood. They're gonna make it impossible. And then of course I get slimed online all 24 hours a day, every day, just like Leah and everybody else. Twitter's always putting out this garbage stuff about me that's all lies. They're just trying to make it so you have this feeling of dread in your stomach and that you give up. And you know why they do it, Tori? Not only do they do it because L. Ron Hubbard told them to, they do it because it works. There are plenty of people who will not speak out because OSA has come around and frightened them. And I don't blame them. It is scary. It can be very scary when you realize that people are sneaking around, calling up people visiting people and it scares people in silence. And that's why they keep doing it, because it does work. And I was in Going Clear. That was a wonderful opportunity for me. I was on Leah's show a couple times. But I can tell you, I've also been on a number of productions that never saw the light of day because OSA got in there and scared the crap out of lawyers and networks, and those things got shelved. So,
but I will say this.
All right.
It's like people that were not in and are not active, don't take it on as something weird happens in your world and it must be OSA. Because I've dealt with that. I went over to a guy's house and he had barbed wire all around the house and all this shit. And his wife said, we're about ready to lose the house. He's lost his job. And she came over to my house and she said, you know what? My husband's going insane because of this and you need to handle it. And I said, okay, I will. And I went back out. He was out in the valley. And I went through all his barbed wire shit and got in his house. And I said, look, I'm going to tell you something. No one gives a shit about you. They don't know you. They're not after you. This is all in your head. So I want you to, number one, stop posting anything about Scientology until you get your job back, until you get your wife back, until you have your house secured. And if all of that's still going great, maybe think about coming back. But until then, nothing. And he never came back. So that was good.
Well, and I don't know if you know about this story, but one person who gave me that call when I was editor-in-chief of the Village Voice to tell me that Scientologists had surrounded her house and she had to be barricaded inside and they were trying to kill her. I got that call personally from Shelley Duvall.
Wow.
Yeah. And I had to try to explain to her, I really don't think it's Scientology. There's not much, And she had some very paranoid ideas about all that, sadly.
Yeah, it's easy to fall into that if you're in that kind of mode to begin with, and then it's like, oh, it's them. And it's like, unless you're really directly connected to them and doing stuff about them, the chances are very slim. They've run out of people. They literally have run out of people. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
I mean, I go down there, there's nobody there. Nobody. And the people that do come out of AOLA are like these old, like thin, they can barely walk across the street. I asked the critics, I say, would you go help that lady up the stairs? Because they can barely get up the stairs. It's awful. It's really awful. Anyway, there you go. All right, Tony, okay, so we did that. All right, here's another one question. Are there any current events that could manifest into a smoking gun that'd really take down Scientology?
That's a very good question. And, I think people have looked at different kinds of cases over the years. Clearly, when the game changed in 2007, 2008, when Marty Rathbun had come out, Mike Rinder came out, Jefferson Hawkins, Tom DeVaught, the Headleys, Amy Scobie, and everybody got together and went to the FBI and talked to the Tampa Bay Times it really changed the way Scientology was covered in the press. I was fortunate that I was in that wave too, to try to point out to people that it was about Sea Org harassment. So over that next couple of years, that was the big thing. We're gonna get the government to recognize that the people in the Sea Org are being abused. They're basically enslaved. They're in prison. And the FBI got really interested, and the FBI did a major investigation in 2009, 2010, and then nothing happened. So, okay, that's unfortunately the horrendous way people were treated in the Sea Org, and there was lots of good evidence of it then, just didn't get the government over the top. Okay, then what might? Well, what I heard later from government agents was what they wanted were financial crimes. Because the thing about, abuse crimes is sometimes it's tough to have the evidence and sometimes it's old. But with financial evidence, financial crimes, it's all in paper, right?
Yeah.
So
paper.
I had actually focused on financial crimes for a while. I had this wonderful story about this 75-year-old guy that they were just, abusing so badly and taking all of his money. And I suggested that he do it, and he did talk to the FBI. So I know that the federal government, this was about 7 or 8 years ago, the government was definitely hearing about financial crimes, and they were very interested in it.
Good.
What might do it today? Today, I think it'd be especially hard. It's just a very bad environment right now for trying to get the federal government interested in that. We might have to wait for an administration change, because when you got Pam Bondi running the Department of Justice, Pam Bondi, who's so friendly to Scientology, I just do not see the Department of Justice doing anything about Scientology as long as she's running it. So I don't, as far as a smoking gun, I personally believe that Scientology is in violation of its secret IRS agreement day in and day out.
Right.
Just because they're violating it, just because they're committing crimes, doesn't mean anything's going to be done about it until the IRS and the Department of Justice have the will to want to do something about it. I'll never forget something Mike Rinder said to me. He said, imagine you're a middle manager at the Department of Justice or the IRS, and there's plenty of evidence to make a case about the Church of Scientology that would really put the organization in a lot of hurt. Maybe even, David Miscavige personally might have liability. You have to make a decision when you're considering whether to actually do that. Are you ready for that to be the rest of your career? Because that is all you're going to be doing for the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
And Mike explained that to me. And I said, you're so right. You're so right. It's not that there's not evidence of trafficking, abuse of children, incredible financial extortion, particularly of older people. Not only is there, and then a violation of inurement with Miscavige and a violation of the IRS agreement. I don't think there's any question. There's a lot of evidence out there. But there's another element, and that you have to have the will of the law enforcement agency to get themselves involved in it, and do it. You and I do, Tory, and do it every day, day in, day out, and dedicate ourselves to it. And they're not interested right now. I'm sorry, they're just not.
Not yet, but I always say, you just keep going, because you never know what one little thing. Like, look at Andreas. All Andreas did was basically say, "Do you want a handout?" I had been reading for 10 years, so I was waking up.
But that's a different subject. That's a different subject. As far as helping individual Scientologists leave, I think people like you, people like the Aftermath Foundation are doing a brilliant job of that. And there are people leaving today because they are doing that hard work. You're doing that hard work. That's fine. That's not going to keep David Miscavige from continuing to abuse people. It's going to take the government. And the government just doesn't have the will right now.
But you and I don't know what, they could be like this. We don't, it feels like it's like rock solid. They're not going to do a thing, right? But it could be, you know what I mean? Like it could be like this. And they just need one person to sit and they go, you know what? Fuck it. We're going in there. We're going to find out what the hell's going on. And we're going to do something about it. It's just, that's my theory, is that You just never know. And it's so easy to go, that's not going to happen. Forget it. I just sat with a bunch of people that are way up. They used to be way up in the church, and they're like, forget it. And I'm like, okay, I get it.
I think it's very important what we do to keep. Basically, I'm just a reporter reporting what I see.
Right.
If Scientology wins a hearing or some part of a lawsuit, that's what I report. And some people get angry at me. It's like, I'm sorry, but Scientology won this part, and that's the story, and that's what I'm reporting.
But you're a reporter.
And so I'm just reporting what's going on.
Yeah.
But the result. But I also do a lot of J&D. I have a lot of fun. And I think the reality is, over time, people have become very inured to Scientology. They were like, oh, Scientology. Now I've heard about that place. And that's really important. That's what you do. That's what, Leah does. And I think it's really made it hard for them to recruit new people. And over the years, they're shrinking. And maybe that's what it's going to take. Is I think there's going to need to be an administration change. And there, of course, there are every 4 years. And also, I think the IRS, the people that are interested, and there are people interested at the IRS, I think they're waiting for Scientology to get weakened to a certain state. Then they can start the investigation and make it happen. But it's not going to happen soon, I don't think.
Well, we don't know. All I'm saying is let's keep doing it, doing what we're doing, because I see it as effective. Certainly what you're doing is very effective. Even all these live stream people that are here. I mean, Will said 2 years ago, I don't care about getting these people out, but I'm going to shut this place down. And Scientology, every window and every building for a year has been shut down. For a year. Why? Because of their cameras. I realized these kids with their cameras are more powerful than a lot of things, because they don't want to be photographed. They don't want people to see, to show on the internet with 10,000 people. Yeah. Like Jessica Palmadessa has like 55,000 people that watch her every night. It's incredible. So they're very popular and very powerful in what they're doing also. And that's a whole different thing that just came up out of nowhere. Who thought of that? The live stream thing. I mean, it was like, it just happened. And Will's out there every night now do you know who Will is? Streets LA?
Oh, yeah.
He's the big black guy.
Tory, I'm sorry. I'm not interested in that guy. I don't like the way he's treated my friends. I'm sorry.
Who isn't he?
You know what, Tory? We can talk about it off air.
Okay. But you have to explain it to me later. I like him. He's a friend. Who is he treating bad?
What did I just say, Tory?
Pardon me?
I said I'll talk to you about it off air.
Okay. Don't forget that Tony is 3 hours ahead of us. Ooh, that's right. Okay. So here's a question from, this is JB808, who lives in Hawaii. Question. Do you know anything about Going Clear 2 that focuses more on Danny Masterson's crimes? Maybe I'm combining two separate things. I don't think there's a Going Clear 2 that I know of.
I mean, I've personally been contacted by, I think, 4 different producers or production teams, all interested in doing something on Danny Masterson. I don't know if any of them are actually doing anything. Keep in mind, Danny's appeal is still in its early stages, and I don't see how you make a documentary about the Danny Masterson story until you see what happens with the appeal. Yeah. And I don't think we're going to get an answer to that until at least the middle of next year.
Yeah, they'll stretch it out.
Yeah.
Tony was so much fun to watch during that, though. You were great afterwards, giving the updates and everything. It was really fun. All right, let's see. Question. Will you be going to the 30-year commemoration of Lisa McPherson passing next month? Would love to see you reconnect with Wise Beard Man.
No, I'll be writing about Lisa, but I always do every year, but I can't get down to Florida next month. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm the same. They have the injunction on Bunker and I that's permanent for the rest of our lives. It's like, I don't care about that, but I hate Florida. I just do.
Well, you're a Californian. Californians always hate Florida.
I know. I know. It's too hot and too humid and sticky and icky. All right. But I'll write about it somehow. Is there a specific event or occurrence from over the years that stands out to you the most, Tony? That's from Kelly, my moderator.
I would have to say that the most amazing thing I personally witnessed was I was standing in the hallway at the end of lunch, and we had all been told to come back to court because there was going to be some kind of an announcement of a verdict at the end of the second trial. It was May 31st, 2023. And as usual, I was one of the first people in the hall. And as usual, another couple of people that were very first was Danny and Bijou. And once again, we were standing within a foot of two of each other.
Who was the other person?
Bijou, his wife, Bijou Phillips, and Danny were just like 2 feet from me. And people were all coming in and filing in, and his family was coming around, and his family was so buoyant. I think they were sure they were getting a hung jury at the end of the second trial, just like they did the first one.
Right.
And we all went into the courtroom, and where I sat in the reporter's row in the back, I'm right behind Bijou.
Right.
And then Danny's in front of her up at the defendant's chair. And the clerk got the verdicts. Now, we all knew he had been charged with 3 counts, and there had to be 2 guilties to send him to prison. 1 was not enough to send him to prison.
Right.
2 guilties were needed. A third would send him to prison for even longer, but it wasn't required. And we knew the first trial had been a hung jury, but apparently they had come to some actual verdicts. So we sat there, and the clerk opened up the first one. Count 1. Guilty. Okay, he needs 1 more, right? Count 2. As soon as he said guilty, I heard this otherworldly howl. And I looked around like, what the hell is that? And I realized it was Bijou. Right in front of me, howling. Because she knew 2 guilties. That doesn't even matter what the third one. The third one was hung, but it doesn't matter.
Right.
And then they had a female deputy ask Danny to stand up and put handcuffs on him. And all of that was right in front of me. And that was, I guess, in my 30 years of reporting, that was the most amazing moment. I've had some others in court with Tom Mesereau messing around with the introduction to ethics book in court and things like that. But that was the most amazing moment, I think, in my 30 years of reporting on Scientology. Seeing Danny Masterson handcuffed, and he's been in custody now for almost 2.5 years.
Right. And I taught him in 6th grade, right?
Yeah, I remember you told me that. Yeah.
And so I knew the mom, and she got him into acting, into like, what do you call it, where you're in magazines, as a
yeah, he was doing advertisements, he was doing TV commercials, and then he got
stuff absolutely like that. And she got him into that. So she knew I knew her. And she was pissed off at me the days that I went there. She would give me a dirty look. And I kept running into her. It was like I didn't try to, but I ran into her. Like one time I ran into her and Danny in the cafeteria. And one time I ran into her. She was leaving the bathroom. I was going in. And she gave me a really dirty look. And I said, look, I'm really sorry. I am. Because I knew him as a young man, it was awful for me that he because I watched that transformation, not all of it, but I watched a bunch of it where those kids just really, the acting kids turned in, Yvonne would have never had that. She was very like inclusive and kind, and you know, she didn't have the I'm better than you, but these kids all turned into the I'm better than you. And, you know, my son was a friend of his, and I said, take me to one of these parties, because it just seemed like it was getting very weird. And we went to the party, and I said, look, I'm going to tell you something. These kids are not your friends anymore. They may have been your friends years ago, but they're not now. And that was it. I sent him off to Europe, and he's had a whole different life ever since. Well, let me ask you one other thing, Tony. And thank you for telling us that. Thank you so much for giving us your time tonight. We all really enjoyed it. It's true.
Thank you so much, Troy. You know I love talking to you, and I'm so glad. You know, that was 24 years ago. We did that story, and then I went to those great parties at your house, and then you dragged me back in when I was editor of the Village Voice into covering Scientology, and I'm just so grateful that I've gotten to know you, and we've been friends over the years. And I just think you do amazing stuff, and I'm so glad that you keep going.
I feel the same with you. You're like dear to my heart, and I'm just always happy. Every time I talk to you, I feel better. So thank you for everything you've done for all of us, because what you're doing is literally history making. I mean, it is. And it's going to go down in the books for a long time. And they can't get rid of you. And that's really makes me happy.
I'm still having fun.
I know. And that's the thing. It's like, have a good time with it. What the hell?
If I wasn't having fun, I wouldn't be doing it. And I'm still having, some of the stories we get to do are so fun. And I love having the front row of this show that is Scientology, and who knows where it's going to go, you know?
Right. Well, keep going,
Thank
Tony.
you, Tory.
And we all love you, and the people that don't, fuck them. that's my feeling about everybody.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, anyway, everybody say goodbye. Thank you for coming on. Kelly, thank you for being the moderator. And please, I'll have to call our other moderator tomorrow, because I think she had to go to bed. She goes to bed earlier. But anyway, thank all of you for coming on. And Tony, we love you. And I'm going to end off now. So here, are you ready?
Tory.
All right. Good night. There we go.